well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Good Monday to you. Thanks for tuning in to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. Glad that you have joined us on the program today. Coming up here in a matter of moments, our friend Salena Zito is going to be joining us, talking about her latest column at the Washington Examiner, all about a small town in Pennsylvania pushing back against the outrage culture where, everything has to be a controversy, even if it's just, one person complaining about something. And I'm glad to see that this pushback took place. Before we get to our conversation with Salena, however, I do have a message for you. To Miss President Trump, you're not alone. I'm coming to you with a special offer that you do not want to miss. Now's your chance to enter to win one of 6 signed photos of President Trump, hand-signed by President Trump, and soon one could be hanging up in your home. When President Trump signed these photos, you want to make sure that all of his supporters had the chance to receive one, and now is your chance. All you have to do is text GUNS, that's G-U-N-S, to 55404 today for your chance to win a beautiful photo of President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump, hand-signed by President Trump himself. And by texting GUNS to 55404 right now, you're going to get exclusive double entry activation for a limited time. Again, text GUNS to 55404 to have your name entered twice to win a hand-signed Trump photo. You don't want to miss this. Contest ends soon. Paid for by the National Republican Senatorial Committee. So let's now talk about what's going on in Pennsylvania, Cumberland County, where the booster club of the local high school, the Cedar Cliff High School football team booster club, decided that they wanted to raise some money for the football team. They were going to hold a raffle, and it was going to be a gun raffle. They raise about $50,000 every year for this high school sports program. And, in a town or a community that supports the Second Amendment, like Cumberland County, Pennsylvania does, a gun raffle is a pretty good way to raise some money. But there was one parent, apparently, who complained about this, took it to the local paper saying, quote, "I cannot support something that is potentially putting guns in more homes of the teenagers I see, knowing these stats." So, did this town then erupt into controversy? Was the raffle pulled? Well, here to talk about it and how the community handled the attempt to make this a controversial topic. Salena Zito, her latest column all about this at the Washington Examiner. Take a look and listen. Salena, it's so good to talk with you, and I got to say I love the latest column, by the way.
Oh, thank you so much. It was incredibly uplifting to write that story, because too many times I'm writing stories about how a town or a person or a school or a church or community lost something because it became sort of this victim of the cultural curators, right?
Mm-hmm.
The politics of the ascendant, which, by the way, doesn't have a majority in this country. However, it is controlled by, it has a loud voice in our cultural curators, meaning academia and corporations and the news media. So it is very heartening to find a town or a community or a school that fights back quietly and with dignity and wins.
Absolutely. And I think that's what it takes. It doesn't necessarily take, particularly in a case like this, where you've got a single parent objecting to this, a gun-related raffle raising money for the local high school booster club. It doesn't take a crowd of 300 or 400 people standing up and shouting them down. You can simply quietly say, "All right, well, you're entitled to your opinion. Duly noted. We're gonna keep on with what we're doing," and that seems to be the case there in Cumberland County.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you know, if anybody's familiar with a booster program or a booster club at a high school, they are made up of their volunteer parents, traditionally just parents, sometimes it's community leaders, who raise money for, in this case, the football team. And they're the ones that make sure that they have safe equipment, that their equipment is upgraded. And at Cedar Cliff, they are tasked every year to raise X amount of money. This year was $50,000. Now, traditionally, they raise that money by, selling gift cards, and you get discounts at local restaurants or stores, and are going around selling chocolate or gift wraps. Well, people don't answer their doors during a pandemic, and restaurants are sort of unable to facilitate, to help out in the way that they traditionally do, mainly because they're struggling on their own. And these parents were left with this $50,000 hole that they needed to fill. And so they decided, well, why don't we raffle off, several things. Some of them were, out of the 10 things they raffled out, 5 of them were guns. Now we're talking Dauphin and Cumberland County, Pennsylvania, where there are as many people that have, there are as many guns as there are cars. It's just a way of life, whether it's hunting, or target shooting or protection. So I would say in that order, guns are a part of life, in central Pennsylvania.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
And so, I love, you talked with David Ellis, who's the owner of D&J Precision Custom Firearms and Ammunition. They were the ones supplying the firearms for the raffle. And he said, I love this, not only did he not have a single person call his store and complain or come to his store and complain, or even, the easiest thing of all, just go on, Facebook and just, type in, oh, I can't believe you're doing this. He said he didn't hear any of that. But he heard a lot of the opposite. He heard people saying, hey, thanks for doing this. Hey, thanks for showing your support for the team. Thanks for being there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's real. And it shows these are the traditions of this community. And, you kind of often wonder, wherever you live, most Americans, 8 out of 10 Americans live within 4 miles of the home that they grew up in. Most Americans have a very emotional tie to place. And so that holds true for these parents at this school. And they were, this community is emotionally tied to each other. They want these kids to be successful. Friday Night Lights in any part of the country are a very community oriented event. And it's not just parents of children on the team, but generations of people go to these games. And they want to see the kids in the, best equipment possible to make sure that they're safe on the field. And so they rally behind them.
So do you get the impression that things like this are more common than the stories that typically make the headlines, where you've got, let's say, it doesn't have to be many, but even a half dozen parents complaining about something like this, and all of a sudden the school district steps in and says, well, we're encouraging the booster club to rethink what it's doing. Is it more common, in your opinion, that one person speaks up and says, I don't like this, and the response from the community is, okay, we appreciate your input, we're going to keep doing it? How, I guess, I don't know, maybe the question is, how much of these controversies, or how many of these controversies, are in fact generated by the media, either news media or social media, as opposed to truly being something that is controversial in any given community?
Well, I think you're on point. I think this happens every day in some form or the other. I think when it grabs attention is the media's having a slow day, and it's like, oh, let's make fun of them gun people, and let's do a story about them putting guns in the hands of teenagers. And there's going to be, this or that. And as often is the case, and you and I have covered these stories for years, it often backfires. I was watching Giselle Fetterman. She is the wife of the Lieutenant Governor. She's the Second Lady of Pennsylvania. And John Fetterman is also running for Senate in Pennsylvania, and is in the Democrat party, looking for the nomination. And she starts attacking the kids and starts attacking the school and say, don't buy raffle tickets in the school. Then that was extended by her, I think Levi is probably 12 years old at this point. What was fascinating is there was maybe like 3 retweets. It's like, do you not know what state you're in? It's Pennsylvania. Have you not seen the national trends in the past 2 years? More people own guns than have ever owned before. More new gun owners. I'm not telling your audience anything they don't know than there have ever been before. And and these new gun owners are both women and black. Mm-hmm. So I think there's been a cultural shift on guns that people that live in a bubble don't comprehend. They don't understand it.
I think you're right. And I think the Democratic Party, look, I'm of the firm belief that I would love to see the right to keep and bear arms be a nonpartisan issue where members of both parties speak up and stand out in support of the right to keep and bear arms. But what's, that's clearly not the case with the Democrat Party. What's fascinating with Fetterman is that, when he first came on the political spotlight, when he was mayor of, what was the town in Pennsylvania where he was mayor? Braddock, Pennsylvania. Thank you. He was sort of billed as like the left's version of a Tea Party activist, right? He's not anti-gun. In fact, he's a gun owner himself. But now, he still called for bans on quote unquote assault weapons. He got into a little bit of trouble actually pulling a gun on somebody, although he wasn't arrested or charged, and he's trying to explain that away. But now it's to the point where, less than 10 years after John Fetterman sort of became this, national political figure because of what he was doing there in Braddock, he was willing to sort of buck that trend, 8 years ago. Oh, no, I'm not anti-Second Amendment. I just believe in a few common sense things. Now, again, apparently his wife said, don't even buy raffle tickets. It's now gun ownership itself that has become taboo, I think, for the Democrat Party overall, even as more individual Democrats, as you say, are actually embracing and exercising their Second Amendment rights.
Yes, that's absolutely right. I mean, he is a gun owner. And was one of the things that voters smell faster than a reporter ever does, because most of them don't live in the places that they cover. One of the first things that voters smell is inauthenticity. And so if you're going to be this one person, but then, I want to win a primary, I have to be someone else. Both voters smell that in the water, and they traditionally don't respond very well to it.
Yeah. So do you think, is this an indication? I know we're still, a little more than a year away from the midterms, but do you think the Second Amendment is going to be a key issue in that Pennsylvania Senate race next year?
Yeah, definitely. I actually think that all the sort of things that you and I were talking about in Virginia in, 2019, 2020, I actually think that if the Republicans win, people are going to say it's Biden, it's partially Biden, but it began with that. Overreach always turns a voter off.
I think you're right about that. Well, listen, let me know if you, speaking of Virginia, if you're coming down to the state to cover the election between now and November 3rd, because I'd love to see you.
I will be there, and I can't wait to see you.
Excellent. All right. Salena, again, really appreciate the time today. Fantastic column at the Washington Examiner. We'll put a link up so folks can read it for themselves, because we've really just kind of scratched the surface here. But it is so good getting a chance to talk with you, my friend. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much. I have a really cool story, too, if any of your listeners are fans of Meat Eater and John Ranella. I had the honor and privilege of going out hunting and fishing with them in Montana, and it's just sort of one of my favorite stories I've ever written. And everybody can catch my stuff at SelenaZito.com. Excellent.
Salena Zito, I know we'll be talking again soon. Talk to you then. Appreciate Salena joining us on the program. Looking forward to having her back again soon, maybe before Election Day, to talk about what's going on in the Commonwealth of Virginia right now. Though, let's turn our attention to today's Armed Citizen story, our good deed of the day, and our recidivist report. We will start there with a story out of Utah, where a University of Utah football player, Aaron Lowe, shot and killed at a house party, and the man arrested for the murder of Aaron Lowe should not have been on the streets, according to a previous victim. Hate it when that happens, but, it's basically, what we talk about during this segment each and every day. George Bekmazian says it was almost 2 years ago that a guy named Book Mawat Book, who was then 20 years old and a teenager, held him at gunpoint during what was supposed to be a sale of a cell phone. They had met online. Hey, I'm selling my phone. Okay, I want to buy it. So they meet up. And then all of a sudden, instead of a transaction, it's a robbery. Bekmazian said, my daughter and I went out to buy a cell phone. He said, of course, I wasn't going to let a 21-year-old girl go by herself, so I went with her. So when they arrived at the meeting, two men approached in hoodies. When they learned that Bekmazian and his daughter were the purchasers, that's when it turned into a robbery. He said, quote, hey, I'm not effing around. Give me the money. And as I turned, I saw that he had a gun pointed right here next to my head, Bekmazian noted. Said he was still in the driver's seat of his car when the gun was pointed at his head. He said, look, we're not messing around. He's got a knife. So Becmazian handed over the money. Two suspects took off running. Becmazian said, as they ran off, he said, I have a concealed carry permit, and I did. He said, I took a few shots at him, which, by the way, don't do that. Unless you're in fear of your life, and at that point, as they're running away, it's probably going to be difficult to prove that you were in fear for your life at that particular moment in time. You could end up facing charges. That was not the case for Mr. Becmazian in this case. Instead, the then 20-year-old Buck Mowat Buck, who's now been charged with Lowe's death, was arrested, charged with first-degree aggravated felony robbery, first-degree felony robbery, and other alleged crimes. And Becmazian said he thought the Buck would have gone to prison for a significant amount of time after what he considers to be a violent crime, but then he saw the news on Sunday, and he said, I saw his name, Buck Buck. He said, that's not a common name. 22 years old. He said, I did the math. He was 22 years ago. This is the same guy. And as KSL-TV points out, court records show that Buck had been convicted in June of 2020 for that robbery, as well as a similar robbery that had been set up through an online ad. But by November of 2020, he was already back out in the streets because according to court records, he was taken into custody as a fleeing passenger of a stolen car. Probable cause statement said that Buck was found with ammo in his pocket that matched the caliber of a stolen handgun found in the vehicle. Buck was charged with second-degree felony theft by receiving stolen property and possession of a dangerous weapon by restricted purchase or by a restricted person. But those charges were ultimately dismissed. And Buck pleaded guilty to a Class A misdemeanor count of failing to stop at the command of a law enforcement officer. Court records show that as the end of March, Buck was free on 36 months probation. So not only should this guy have gotten prison time for the armed robbery, and he didn't, he got months, if that. When he was arrested in possession of ammunition that he is not allowed to possess as a prohibited person, rather than take that case forward either at the local level or refer it to the U.S. Attorney's Office, where Buck could have faced 5 years in prison without the possibility of early release, they gave him another plea deal. And he was allowed to plead guilty to a misdemeanor charge, got another slap on the wrist, and here we are less than 2 years later. Less than a year later, because that was November of 2020 when he was arrested. So less than a year later, Buck now charged with shooting and killing a University of Utah football player. And you know what? George Becmazian's right. This guy should not have been out on the streets. And it was a failure of the criminal justice system that put him back there instead of behind bars. Today's armed citizen story from Port Arthur, Texas, where the local church's chicken was the site of a potential armed robbery, but an armed citizen saved the lives of customers and employees by intervening, shooting and killing one of two of the robbery suspects there at this church's chicken. This was Friday night about 8:45. Both suspects struck by the armed citizen fled the scene. Police say one died at a hospital. The other, located at a nearby apartment complex, was treated at the ER. Detectives interviewed and released the citizen who stayed on scene at churches. The case remains under investigation. The local police chief says that one of the suspects may be from Louisiana. Say they're also investigating the possibility that the pair connected to another robbery of another fast food restaurant there in Port Arthur. But again, the armed citizen acting in defense of himself, the other customers in the store, the employees, and his quick thinking and fast action saved who knows how many lives potentially. Finally today, our Good Samaritan, our good deed of the day. And in this case, the individuals who were in the right place at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing to rescue a 97-year-old woman from her burning home. In fact, a New Hampshire man recovering after going into cardiac arrest after helping to save a woman from that burning home. And then a Good Samaritan gave him CPR after also helping to rescue the elderly woman. That's amazing. Larlana Garvis is the one who recorded the video. You see the screen capture there. She said the windows are getting blown out from the flames. She drove by this house fire. She flagged down another driver. That person and a neighbor then kicked in the front door. Moments later, they run out. They've got the 97-year-old with them. Garvis said she was still there in her little living room chair, little velour chair, just sitting there. She did have some burns. They managed to save the woman's dog as well, but the neighbor who helped rescue the woman then collapsed on the lawn. Nashville firefighter said he went into cardiac arrest. Garvis said, I realized my phone was still in my hand, so I just tossed my phone. I instantly started compressions. I didn't stop. I kept talking to him. I said, listen, man, you saved her. You're not dying. And so she performed CPR until the paramedics arrived, put him in an ambulance. Good news is, according to Garvis, the neighbor is recovering. She talked to him over the weekend. He said, I don't remember it, but I love you for it. And he said, you did a number because I'm sore. Well, sore is better than dead. So again, a huge thank you to the neighbor and the driver who rushed in, saved the life of that 97-year-old woman. And then again, you got to give a big kudos to Lariana Davis, who was in the right place at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing to save the life of the man who just saved a life. She said, everybody can be a hero every single day. You never really know what's going to happen to you. I was just driving home and I happened to see it. Well, we're glad that you didn't just drive by, Ms. Garvis. And again, we thank you and this 97-year-old woman's neighbor for your very, very good deeds. That is going to do it for this edition of Bearing Arms. Cam and Company want to thank you for being a part of the program. As always, don't forget to check out bearingarms.com throughout the day for even more Second Amendment news and information. And we'll be back tomorrow. If you like what you see, by the way, you can also become a VIP member at bearingarms.com. All you have to do is use the promo code GUNS. You get 25% off of your VIP membership. We really do appreciate your support. It allows us to do things like bringing this program, let you know what's going on in the world of the right to keep and bear arms. And as our way of saying thanks, we want to give you some exclusive content like analysis, news stories that you won't find anywhere else. You get all that when you become a VIP member. And again, we really do appreciate your support. Until we talk again, be well, be safe, and be free.